each and every one of you, tourism management students. Welcome to TM Elective 3, which is Ecotourism. So last meeting, we've talked about the role of ethics in ecotourism. We've encountered what is ethics, also the approaches to ethics, the types of ethical issues, the term cultural prostitution, and many more. So today, we are going to talk about the topic entitled From Policy to Professionalism. So let's further reiterate our topic for today. So it says here that tourism and ecotourism policy encompasses a broad spectrum of concerns related to the implementation of tourism programs around the world. So ano yung mga tourism programs na yon? So it includes social, ecological, and economic relationship, but also how tourism affects or is affected by tourists, local people, operators, government, and so on. Another thing about tourism policy is that it is the identification of series of goals and objectives which help an agency, usually a governmental one, in the process of planning the tourism industry. So sinasabi natin dito that tourism and ecotourism policy encompasses, kumbaga, ang sakop niya is, sinasabi dyan, broad spectrum. So, ano ba yung sinasabi natin na broad spectrum? Ibig sabihin, it focuses on a different range of different kinds of concerns or topics. Ibig sabihin, malawak. Iba't ibang klaseng mga concerns, mga issues, mga topics, mga factors, yung mai-encounter natin kapag pinag-usapan natin yung tourism and ecotourism policy. So, particularly, pinag-uusapan din natin dyan how tourism affects. So, paano nakaka-apekto yung turismo sa kapwa nila turista, 'di ba? Sa mga local people, sa community, sa mga tourism operators, sa government, at sa mga iba pang stakeholders. So, when we say tourism policy, so you can take note of this. This is what we call the set of discourses, decisions, and practices driven by government. Okay? So, ang nagpapatupad ng mga decisions na to, ng mga practices na to, is the government. But of course, the government can't do it alone. So, kailangan nila ng collaboration with the private or social actors. So, itong mga private sectors na to, yung mga social actors na to, in collaboration with the government, they have the intention to achieve yung objectives na related kay tourism. So now, I have a question. Why do you think tourism policy is important? Bakit importante na meron tayong sinusunod na policy, na set of rules or guidelines when it comes to tourism? It's because tourism policy promotes, okay, and sustain tourism development. At yung tourism development na to, it plays an essential role in delivering economic benefits. So, 'di ba? So, itong mga economic benefits na to, hindi lang yung ekonomiya natin yung natutulungan, but also the environment itself. Another thing about this, yung tourism policy, it serves as a pattern, it serves as a framework para lahat ng tao, lahat ng mga people involved is merong susundan na pattern. Kumbaga sa guidelines, meron silang susundan na mga step-by-step procedure. Kung ano man yung tama, kung ano man yung mali. So according to Akihurst, however, policy development is much more detailed. It is further defined as a strategy for the development of the tourism sector that establishes objectives and guidelines as a basis for what needs to be done. This means identifying and agreeing objectives, establishing priorities, placing in a community context the roles of national governments, national tourist organizations, local governments, and private sector businesses, establishing possible coordination and implementation of agreed program to solve identified problems with monitoring and evaluation of these programs. So, to simplify everything that is written or that is expressed by Akihurst, sinasabi lang niya dito that policy development is a key function of the local government. Because 'di ba, ang daming mga ginagawa or ang daming mga nakapaloob na strategy, ang daming mga nakapaloob na factors inside a policy development. Sinasabi dyan that policy development is a process. Okay? So, it is a process na wherein magde-decide tayo ano ba yung dapat nating ma-achieve. Ano ba yung dapat natin na ma-establish. 'Di ba? Paano natin gagawin or how can we do this kind of objectives, yung guidelines, paano natin ma-identify, paano natin ma-establish yung ating priorities. Okay? So, aside from that, how are we going to do those objectives and guidelines in an efficient and economical way? And aside from that, nandyan din nakapaloob, sino yung mga gagawa, 'di ba? Sino yung in charge para sa policy development. So, nakalagay nga dyan, yung national government, yung National Tourist Organization, yung local government, and of course, the private sector businesses. Now, in policy development, mapapatanong tayo, why is it there is a policy? Bakit may policy pa? Pwede naman na mag-operate na lang tayo ng business. Pwede naman na, let's say, i-advertise, kumbaga magkaroon ng marketing strategy tayo sa particular destination na to. So, policy is present or policy is always there because it helps them to run efficiently in achieving their objectives. So, kumbaga, kung may policy tayo na sinusunod, we are becoming efficient and effective. Kasi, meron tayong pattern. Meron tayong guide kung paano natin susundin yung ating mga objectives. So, it develops to comply with the legal and social environment. So, may policy because nandiyan nakadugtong yung tinatawag natin na legal and social aspect. So, may kinalaman sa community, may kinalaman sa economic status, may kinalaman sa tinatawag natin na law or batas. And of course, policy is always present also because it aims to build goodwill to the employees and tourists. So, may policy para magkaroon tayo ng disiplina, para ma-practice natin yung, let's say, code of ethics, ano ba yung mga proper standard, proper procedures sa ating workplace or doon sa destination, para sa employees at para sa mga turista. So, that is policy development. So, the sector most responsible for the impetus to create policy is government in either a passive, okay, or an active manner where government takes action to discriminate in favor of the tourism sector. So, ang sinasabi natin dito sa slide na to is that the government really plays a, let's say, deeper role and bigger role sa ating ecotourism or tinatawag natin na tourism industry. So, sino-sino yung mga in charge in this kind of creation ng policy? Of course, yung mga tourism agencies, yung tourism board, and of course, yung government. So, lahat sila, they aim to collaborate with one another in order to create a policy. So, ano yung mga gagawin nila? So, they can advise a strategy, they can offer opportunities, okay? They can consult and cooperate sa private sector. Of course, they can prepare a particular destination marketing strategy, kung paano nila kung paano nila ipopromote yung particular destination na to. And of course, they can provide an identification for the appropriate market. So, yun yung ilan sa mga ginagawa or sa mga roles ng government towards tourism industry. So, it says here that Caucasus feels that there has not been a good understanding between the complex nature of the environment and tourism. Example is the synergistic effects of tourism coupled with a high degree of administrative fragmentation. adaptation. So, pag kasi sinabi nating synergistic effect, ito yung, let's say, pag pinag-add natin yung dalawang substance, because this is synonymous sa, let's say, biology or chemistry meaning. So, pag pinag-add natin yung dalawang substance, okay, so pag pinag-combine natin siya, it has an effect. Okay, so it has an effect that is greater than either one of them. So, yun si synergistic effect. And of course, may tinatawag tayo dito na administrative fragmentation. So, ano ba yung tinatawag natin na fragmentation? So, if you're going to research about it, it is the use of the different suppliers or component, okay, in a production of a good. So, for example, in tourism industry, di ba, may mga airplanes. So, yung mga parts ng airplanes na yon, merong maraming sources yun. May mga, let's say, inassemble siya across the world. So, but in this case, ang sinasabi natin na administrative fragmentation is about the collaboration, the sourcing, and let's say, assembly ng mga people in charge within the ecotourism. From the word itself, admin or administration. So, a key point in Caucus's argument is that environmental policies now are characterized by a more holistic, ecosystem-based approach that relies less on specific issues and more on a regional, integrated perspective. So, ano-ano yung mga approach na nakasaad dito? So, number 1 is linking development policy with environmental management. So, ano ba pag sinabi nating environmental management? So, dapat daw, si policy development has something to do with environmental management. So, when we say environmental management, it is the management of interaction and impact of human activities on the natural environment. So, it has something to do with the activities of the human, yung mga turista, towards sa environment. So, ano ba yung objective ni environmental management? So, ang objective niya is to improve human life quality. So, that is why hindi lang one-side basis yung pinag-aaralan. Hindi lang about the human activities. So, sa alang-alang din dito yung about sa environment. The interaction between the two factors. So, nakalagay din dito yung mobilization of resources and the use of government to administer the use of both natural and economic goods and services. So, kung paano natin magagamit ng maayos yung mga resources at kung paano i-implement ni government yung paggamit ng mga resources na to. So, both natural and economic. So, number 2 is regional level environmental management schemes, which would provide a framework for guiding local environmental management programs. So, in here, pag kasi sinabi nating regional, it has something to do with full range scales between local and global. So, dito, nakapaloob yung about sa mga watersheds, mga ecosystem, soil acid rain, and about sa pollution. So, yun yung approach na sinasabi sa number 2. So, sa number 3, integration of tourism policy and environmental management policies at the local, regional, and national level. And number 4, increasing local capacity to cope with environmental issues, particularly in rapidly developing tourist destination areas. So, dito sa number 4, nabanggit na naman yung term na local capacity o yung tinatawag natin na tourism carrying capacity. So, it has something to do with the so-called habitat and wildlife. Okay? So, in here, you can determine the largest population of a particular species. Okay? So, malalaman mo ano ba yung largest population ng mga species na to, ng mga living organisms na to, na pwede nating suportahan in order for them to remain doon sa habitat na yon for a long period of time. And aside from that kasi, pag sinabi nating local capacity, aside from the species or organisms, dito din natin nalalaman what is the maximum number of people that may visit a tourist destination on the same time. Okay? So, gaano karami yung kaya na, let's say, ay accommodate ng particular destination na to? Gaano karaming tao? Okay? And at the same time, without causing distraction to the physical, economic, social, and cultural environment. Yes, we can accept a number, thousands of people, let's say, in a particular destination, but we have to make sure that they will not be part of the distraction or exploitation ng environment. Okay, so those are the approaches that is being mentioned by Caucasus. So, priority areas identified by Caucasus in Europe for sustainable tourism development, utilizing the aforementioned concept. So, meron siyang mga priority areas na minention dito such as the coastal areas, rural areas, built environment, urban areas, and islands. So, yun yung isa sa mga nakapaloob sa sustainable tourism development na ginawa ni Caucasus for Europe. So, one of the best examples of policy related to hotel development was the implementation of measures to control the height of hotel development in Bali, Indonesia, and other places around the world. So, kung makikita nyo dito sa picture, meron kasing issue or meron kasing parang, let's say, regulation. So, there is a strict regulation in Bali, Indonesia that has something to do with the height of the hotel. Okay? Yung taas daw ng hotel. So, we all know that Indonesia has something to do with sustainable development and cultural preservation. At yung Bali is one of the famous destinations sa Indonesia. So, ang nangyari dito, there is, let's say, sa kanilang turismo, there is a good effect and also a bad effect. Because alam naman natin that Indonesia is rich with regards to their culture, particularly sa religious side. So, nagkaroon ng debate about this regulation because sinasabi nila dito that in 1970, Bali province confirmed a regulation of a building height restriction of 15 meters. Okay? So, yung height restriction ng mga hotel sa Bali should not exceed sa 15 meters. Or sinasabi dyan, to not go over the height of coconut palm trees. So, kung makikita nyo sa picture, may mga coconut palm trees, hindi dapat mas mataas yung height ng building or ng hotel sa palm tree. So, yun yung isa sa mga regulation nila. So, it seemed to be an effective regulation since there were yet to be a high-rise building built in Bali. So, except lang yung Grand Bali Beach Hotel in Sanur. Because, yun kasi is a 10-story hotel. Kaya lang, yun kasi is nagawa na bago pa magkaroon ng regulation na katulad nung sinasabi natin. So, syempre, with regards to the issue, nagkaroon ng mga debate, di ba? Nagkaroon ng mga pagpupulong, pag-uusap about this. And of course, nagkakaroon na rin ng pressure sa mga Balinese, sa local community, and also for the tourists. So, bakit ganon? Bakit nagkakaroon ng issue with regards to that? Hindi lang siya about the height of the hotel, but because yung sinasabi natin na coconut palm trees, merong kasing significant role yon or may significant meaning sa kanilang religion, which is yung tinatawag natin na Hinduism. So, sinasabi dito, their existence in the Hinduism ritual is critical and it has a metaphoric meaning that goes beyond just a coconut. The deep inside of coconut trees is that the development should realize the tangible limitation which is permitted and what is prohibited, especially to the relation to Trihita Karana. So, meron kasi silang parang, let's say, meron silang parang belief about Trihita Karana. So that is their traditional philosophy for life. So yung philosophy nila na yun has something to do with agriculture, with regards to human interaction and architecture. So sinasabi dito that there is really a big challenge to keep this regulation clear. But of course, with the regulation, let's say development, 'di ba? Development of tourism, so magkakaroon din ng kalinawan lahat. But then again, this regulation is ang covered niya is from 2009 to 2029. So it has, let's say, 20 years. 20 years ang coverage no resolution na ito or ng regulation na ito. So yun is nakapaloob sa Bali Detailed Spatial Plan RTRW 2009 to 2029, particularly in article number 95 verse 2 point B. So doon nakapaloob yung mismong regulation na to. So if you want to further research about this, you can simply browse the internet and yes, search about Bali, yung mga hotels in Bali. So in support of what Caucasus illustrates above, Faya Sola writes that tourism policy has started to change in line with the evolving nature of the tourism industry. So of course, as time goes by, yung mga tourism policy na to pwedeng mabago, depende, 'di ba? Depende sa mga nangyayari sa tourism industry. So, nowadays kasi ang tourism industry, marami siya, 'di ba? Maraming iba't ibang klase ng tourism. Adventure tourism, cultural tourism, 'di ba? So, MICE tourism, ecotourism, and so on. So, pag nagbago yung isa sa mga tourism na yon, of course, it has something to do also with the changes na mangyayari sa tourism policy. So, Hallager writes that bureaucracies regulate tourism in basically two fashions. So, ano ba pag sinabi nating bureaucracy? So, basically, it is what we call the administration or the government itself. So, it regulates about directing tourists, locals, and industry through legislation and through the provision of tourism infrastructure. So, dito nakapaloob, syempre, sa isang lugar, meron talaga tayong susundin na mga legislation, yung mga batas, yung mga rules, mga regulations, mga policy. At ang nakapaloob doon or ang maaapektuhan doon or ang dapat sumunod doon is the tourists, yung mga locals, yung industry mismo. And of course, there should be a provision of tourism infrastructure. So, ano yung mga infrastructure na yan? Yung mga sewage, 'di ba? Yung mga highways, mga buildings, yung mga drainages na yan, water system. So, lahat yun is nakapaloob sa tourism infrastructure. So, ecotourism and policy. So, Liu suggests that government policy is one of the keys to supporting the development of ecotourism. So, this means a balance between development and conservation, supply versus demand, benefits versus cost, and people versus the environment. So, sinasabi dito that government policy is really important. So, katulad ng nabanggit natin kanina. Because in here, yung mga government agency, with the collaboration of other people na involved sa government, they provide such kind of regulation and of course yung legislation. So, nagkakaroon ng regulation and controls para sa tourism in order for us to ensure that this tourism industry can sustain the level and compete with other tourist destination. So, hindi pwede kasi na lahat ng bagay is may freedom tayo. So, ang pinag-uusapan natin dito is about the nature, yung ating environment. So, we need to implement such kind of regulations and such kind of control kasi nga, maraming people ang let's say, ang involved dito. Kaya nga di ba sinasabi natin dyan, people versus the environment. At yung environment, hindi yan manlalaban. Diba? Manlalaban man yan pagdating ng panahon. So, kumbaga, if we are, let's say, not sustaining, hindi natin pinapractice yung sustainable tourism, lagi tayong nagkakalat sa mga pinupuntahan natin, hindi natin sinusunod yung mga regulations sa area, hindi naman natin agad mararamdaman yung epekto. Pero pag tumagal lang tumagal, doon natin malalaman kapag may mga natural disasters, 'di ba? Kapag may mga earthquakes, pagbabaha. So ang nadadama yung environment, at yung environment later on hindi na tayo kayang sagipin. So, in here, Lou feels that government must play a leadership role in providing the necessary financing, management skills, and knowledge so the private sector can operate smoothly and efficiently. So, dahil yan is ecotourism, dahil yan is about nature, the environment, ang talagang magte-take in charge dyan is the government. But as we've mentioned a while ago, the government should collaborate with the private sector. So, ano dapat yung mga gawin ni government? So, the government must facilitate efficient private sector activity by minimizing market interference and relying on competition as a means of control. Number 2, ensure a sound macroeconomic environment. So, ano ba yung sinasabi natin na macro environment? So, ito yung condition that exists in the economy as a whole. So, pag sinabi nating macro, it is broad, malawak. So, it acts as a whole rather than a particular sector or region. So, dito nakapaloob yung tinatawag natin na DEPES. Okay, so DEPEST. So, D stands for demographic, E stands for economic, P stands for political, E stands for ecological, S stands for social-cultural or socio-cultural rather, and letter T stands for technological. So, lahat ng yon is nakapaloob sa tinatawag natin na macroeconomic environment. So, guarantee law and order and just the settlement of disputes, ensure the provision of appropriate infrastructures. So, it is very important sa mga particular destination na may tamang tourism infrastructure para nang sa ganon is magkaroon ng, let's say, satisfaction yung mga turista, magkaroon ng comfortability with regard sa pagpunta nila sa destination, and of course, para na rin sa kanilang safety and security. So, ensure the development of human resources. Yan, yung mga employees natin, yung mga, let's say, tour operators, anyone na nagtatrabaho sa tourism industry. Protect the public interests without obstructing private sector activity with too many regulation. So, yung mga private sector, hindi natin sila pwedeng ipitin, 'di ba? Because, let's say, hindi natin sila pwedeng ipitin na masyado tayong maging mahigpit sa mga private sector. Kasi yung mga private sector na yan, most likely sila yung mga nag-uumpisa pa lang. So, may kinalaman nga dyan yung number 7, which is promote private sector activity by not competing in the business arena with private enterprise. So, how would you do that? You have to acknowledge yung mga small role business or the role of small business entrepreneurs and facilitate their activities. So, those are the things na dapat gawin ng government with regards to ecotourism and policy. So, policy may naturally evolve out of first identifying many of the catalysts and constraints to the development of the industry. So, in case of ecotourism, this process must proceed out of government's general development policy and strategy. So, ano yung mga steps na involved dito sa policy na sinasabi natin? So, number 1 is study preparation. Of course, dito nakapaloob yung assessment of the type of planning. So, anong klaseng plano yung gagawin natin? Anong klaseng pagpaplano? And of course, the preparation of terms of references. So, ano yung mga references natin? Saan tayo kukuha ng mga information, ng mga ideas? Number 2 is determination of objectives. Of course, kapag gagawa ka ng plano, you have to determine ano ba yung mga objectives mo, ano ba yung mga goals. And your objective must reflect the national or regional government's general ecotourism policy. So, kung ano man yung gagawin mong objective, dapat is connected yun sa tourism policy ng national or regional. So, dapat din naka-include doon yung development priorities. So, ano ba yung mga dapat mong, let's say, i-prioritize, i-emphasize? Yung mga heritage, yung marketing. So, how about the annual growth na makukuha mo kapag nagkaroon ka na ng, let's say, nag-operate na yung mismong lugar. So, number 3 is survey. So, a complete evaluation and inventory of existing resources must be made. So, the ultimate aim of this inventory is to link attraction to various segments and forms of development. So, syempre, tayo, kung magbubukas tayo ng particular attraction or destination, dapat nakalink. Sino ba yung ating target market? Ano ba yung mga market segments natin? With regards to the demographic, diba, sociographic, geographical style. So, dapat is nakapaloob din doon. Analysis and synthesis. So, this step involves studying the historical background of tourism in the region, analyzing constraints to the development, legal and risk management consideration, financing, tax incentives, protection of cultural and natural features, and other economic related variables. So, you are going to analyze a lot of factors with regards to the step number 4. Step number 5, policy and plan formulation. So, dahil na-analyze mo na yung mga factors na involved, so ang gagawin mo na dito, your structure or your policies must be structured to reflect the economic, social, and ecological needs of the region. So, ibig sabihin dito, yung policies mo is nakaayos na. At dapat, yung mga policies na ginawa mo is nagre-reflect kung ano ba yung kailangan ng particular destination. So, in here, nakapaloob yung mga infrastructure, human resources, transportation, yung mga intersectoral coordination with regards to the tax incentives, at yung mga tourism programs. So, nakasaad lahat yon sa policy and plan formulation. So, the step number 6 is about recommendation. So, after step 1 to 5, so you are going now to have a result. Diba? Magkakaroon ka na ng result. And the result is a plan that indicates attractions, tourism development areas, transportation linkages, tour routes, and design and facility standard. So, the last step will be the implementation and monitoring. So, sinasabi dito, prior to the implementation, bago i-implement yung ginawa mo na policy or strategy, so sinasabi dyan that there should be a formal review. Okay? So, dapat magkaroon muna ng pag-aaral, i-review pa o siya ulit ng mga in charge or let's say nung may mga authority or yung nandun sa administration para makita if the policy or the strategy itself is feasible. So, kung posible ba? Kung makakatulong pa. Okay? So, sinasabi dito that it will be serve as a guide to the various developments. So, those are the 7 steps or processes with regards to the general development policy and strategy. So, the next one is the regulation. So, regulation refers to the efforts of an agency to regulate the actions of businesses which fall within its jurisdiction. The fear, as always, is that if left unchecked, tourism will contribute to a diverse range of social and ecological impacts. So nowadays, it is very important na magkaroon ng strict regulation, lalong-lalo na may COVID-19. So kung i-open naman yung turismo natin, or kung i-open naman yung mga iba pang lugar within here in the Philippines, so dapat may collaboration, may efforts yung mga agencies na yan, whether it is government, international, or trade, private, or public sector. Kasi nga, sabi nga dyan, if left unchecked, magkakaroon talaga ng mga negative social and ecological impacts. So, the next one is about the certification, accreditation, and professionalism. So, now let's define the two terms. Ano ba yung pagkakaiba ni certification and accreditation? So, certification is a process by which an individual is tested and evaluated in order to determine his or her mastery of specific body of knowledge and some portion of body of knowledge. So, parang halimbawa lang yan, sa course ninyo, maraming mga certification na pwede kayong kunin. 'Di ba? So, meron tayong mga national certificate or may mga national assessments tayo with regards to tour guiding, and if mapasa mo yun, magkakaroon ka ng certificate or national certificate. So, ang sinasabi lang natin sa certification is about yung sinasabi natin na credential. So, from the word itself, certified, o yung sinasabi natin na credential na na-earn mo, na ikaw mismo yung naka-earn, na pwede mong ipakita sa tao. It is a formal attestation or confirmation. So, sino yung nagbibigay ng certification? Of course, it is offered by professional organization or company. Na sila mismo yung, let's say, merong specialization with a particular field. So, aside from that, so yung certification, it can be described as the process of assuring industry and consumers that the assessed company has met a set of minimum standards. Siyempre, hindi ka naman mag-check-in sa isang hotel. Hindi ka naman kukuha ng isang employee kung alam mo na wala naman siyang knowledge about it, na wala naman siyang mastery about it, na hindi naman talaga siya certified na tour guide or tour operator. So, example ng mga belong sa tourism industry na nagbibigay ng certification is halimbawa yung tinatawag natin na ISO or the International Organization for Standardization. So, si ISO, so isa sila sa mga tinatawag natin na nagbibigay ng certification scheme sa mga large hotels at sa mga tour operation or tour operators rather. So, bakit nila binibigay yun? For environmental or quality assurance. So, ibig sabihin, there are certified hotels na pwede silang mag-operate. There are certified tour operators na pwede rin silang mag-operate or pwede rin silang i-hire ng mga, let's say, particular organization or nung destination. So, the next one is the accreditation. So, ano naman yung tinatawag nating accreditation? So, basically, when we say accreditation, a process by which an association or agency evaluates and recognizes a program of study or an institution as meeting certain predetermined standards or qualification. It applies only to institutions and their programs of studies or their services. So, for example, yung mga universities, diba? Yung iba't ibang mga businesses, they are accredited. So, pag sinabing accredited, they met. Okay? So, they met the predetermined or the determined standards or qualification. Ibig sabihin, na-reach nila yung mga kailangan, yung standard na hinihingi. So, accreditation or tourism accreditation means to assist your business to meet and exceed your customers' expectations. So, paano mo mami-meet or ma-exceed 'Di ba? Paano mo masosobrahan pa yung customer expectations na yan? So, you can, number 1, adherence to industry standards. Of course, you need to adhere. You need to comply kung ano man yung standards ng industry. And of course, kung ano man yung codes of practices, mga codes of ethics na dapat sundin. So, number 2, compliance with business and industry regulation. Number 3, development and implementation of business and marketing plans. So, dapat ang business mo, yung destination na yan, merong marketing plan na tinatawag. Implementation of policy and procedures relating to human resources, customer service, risk management, and environment. So, if ever na ma-meet mo yung 4 na to, you can exceed yung customer expectation. And you are therefore in line para mabigyan ng accreditation. So, ngayon, ma'am, who may apply for accreditation? Sino ba yung mga pwedeng mag-apply para sa tinatawag natin na accreditation? So, we have 2 particular enterprises na tinatawag. We have the primary tourism enterprises and the secondary tourism enterprises. So, kindly take note of this. So, sa primary tourism enterprises, dito nakapaloob yung mga accommodations, yung mga travel and tour services, yung MICE o yung tinatawag natin na meetings, incentive, conventions, and exhibitions, yung ecotourism, at yung tourism frontliner. So, silang 5 nakapaloob sa tinatawag na primary tourism enterprises. So, silang 5, pwede silang mag-apply for accreditation. The next one is the secondary tourism enterprises. So, sino-sino naman to? So, the health and wellness services, such as yung mga clinics, yung mga medical concierge, mga spa, mga tertiary hospital. Number 2 is the tourism-related enterprises. So, yung mga galleries, museum, mga restaurants, yung mga agri-tourism farm site na yan, mga restrooms, tourism training center, institute, mga rest areas, and yung number 3 is the tourism frontliner. So, all of this will be posted in our Edmodo class so you can have your backup. Okay? So, para may kopya din kayo ng mga sinabi ko. So, those are the differences, or that is the differences between certification and accreditation. So, in further support for the idea of accreditation, Gass and Williamson offer the following. Accreditation provides adventure program because it has the ability to achieve standards without losing the flexibility to decide and design how to meet these standards. Or paano natin makukuha, paano natin ma-achieve yung standard na to. So, accreditation takes a systematic view of the process of adventure programming rather than dividing it into individualized categories. So, pag merong tayong accreditation, if ever na gusto nating mag-apply for accreditation, there is a systematic view. Kumbaga, may sistema. Meron tayong mga processes na dapat sundin. Accreditation encourages ongoing improvement through internal and external review. So, ang accreditation, hindi lang siya basta nagre-review ng mga documents, ng mga papers, but also yung external, yung nakikita ng tao. So, meron din siyang nagagawa with regards to the improvement. So, accreditation assures clients, agencies, and resource managers that a program has clearly defined and appropriate objectives and maintains conditions under which their achievement can be met reasonably. Of course, accreditation, ina-assure niya, sinisigurado niya na yung mga clients na to, mga agencies na to, yung mga resource manager na to, na itong establishment na to, itong tao na to is accredited. Okay? Na yung lahat ng mga programs, lahat ng mga objective is naisaayos. Kumbaga, clear and defined. because they all met yung tinatawag natin na objectives or yung kanilang goals. So, what are the advantages of accreditation? So, the ecotourist has a knowledge of what will be taught and approaches used will be the best and the safest. So, syempre, so in here, dahil yung tao is accredited, 'di ba? Dahil yung tao is accredited at yung eco tour operator is accredited din, so they can share their knowledge, they can share their mastery, they can share their experiences doon sa mga eco-tourists. At itong mga eco-tourists na to is matututo from them. So, the eco-tour operator has a recognized and accepted methodology and thus increase social status. So, yung mga eco-tour operators na yan, yung mga tour operators na yan, they have their own methodology. Meron silang sinusunod na procedure or standard operating procedure based on the accreditation. The employer of ecotourism guides has knowledge of an accepted industry standards. Okay? So, yung mga employers na yan, meron din silang sinusunod na industry standard. Number 4, the government has the knowledge that new operators have been taught to a minimum standard. So, kapag baguhan pa lang yung mga employees natin, yung mga tour operators na yan, mga tour guides, they make sure na bago nila i-hire yan, meron na silang knowledge. At alam na nila kung ano yung standard na dapat gawin. So, the disadvantages is, number 1, of course, it creates a relationship of mutual dependency and social distance. Kasi syempre, kung ano yung nakapaloob sa accreditation, yun yung susundin natin. Doon tayo magiging dependent. Eco-tour operators are assessed on their accomplishments. Of course, they need to, let's say, get certifications para nang sa ganun is ma-assess sila. Para nang sa ganun is makita if they are really into their job. Kung meron silang sense ng human and natural environment relationship. So, i-assess yung kanilang knowledge, yung skills, yung kanilang mastery. So, professionals can tend to rationalize and focus on facts, objective data, and procedures, thus potentially losing the intrinsic intuitive association that is often formed through ecotourism. So, in here kasi, dahil meron tayong sinusunod na guidelines, so yung mga professionals na yan, yung mga organizations na yan na nag-accredited, dun lang sila nakarely sa kung ano man yung sinusunod nila na mga facts, mga objective. And alam naman natin ang ecotourism is, let's say, they are natural. Sometimes it is unconscious kasi hindi naman natin alam kung ano yung mga mangyayari, kung ano yung mga facts about the, let's say, destination, na yung mga, let's say, indigenous people lang, yung mga local community lang ang nakakaalam. But these professionals, they have their own facts. Meron lang silang sariling pinaniniwalaan at sinusunod nila kung ano man yung standard. So, number 4, through commodification, ayan, natural and cultural environments as a means to an end and so become alienated from the natural world. So, disadvantage, pag sinabi kasi natin commodification, we are transforming yung goods and services, ideas, even nature and personal information, and people into a commodity. Ibig sabihin, yung ating nature, yung ating environment, ginagawa natin siya as a commodity in exchange of money. So, that's why, isa yun sa mga advantages din ng accreditation. Because we are becoming dependent doon sa ating natural and cultural environment. So, the last one is about the eligibility for accreditation is based on the 8 criteria. So, according to this criteria, ecotourism, so for you to be eligible para sa accreditation, ecotourism should focus on personally experiencing natural areas. So, of course, we are into nature. We are submerged sa nature. That's why we should focus sa mga destinations na yan, sa mga natural areas na yan. Nang sa ganon, yung mga turista, yung mga ecotourists, they can learn from it, they can understand it, and they can appreciate yung area. So, integrates into each experience opportunities to understand natural areas, represents best practice for ecologically sustainable tourism, productively contributes to the conservation of natural areas, provides constructive, ongoing contributions to local communities, interprets, involves, and is sensitive to different cultures. So, particularly yung mga indigenous people. Because alam naman natin, sila yung may mga kakaibang needs. Sila yung nangangailangan din ng, let's say, respect with regards sa local community. So, kaya kung may interactions man between the ecotourists and the indigenous people, dapat is nakasaad din yun sa accreditation or sa tourism policy. So, consistently meets client expectations, and its marketing is accurate and leads to realistic expectation. So, whatever you are planning to promote, whatever you are planning to include in your plan, so dapat lahat ng yun is realistic, makatotohanan, yung pwede natin ma-achieve, yung pwede nating magawa. So, those are the eligibility for accreditation, or those are the criteria, rather, for you to be eligible para sa accreditation. So that concludes our topic for today about from policy to professionalism. So if ever you miss some points in our lesson, feel free to rewind this lesson in our YouTube channel. And of course, if you miss some points, feel free also to replay this video. So thank you so much for listening in our today's lesson. Have a nice day and thank you.